Hey, this is Pete from 21st Century Prepper. Tonight's podcast, we're going to be discussing living off the land. Tonight, I have Skip with me.
Good evening, everybody.
And Tony.
Hello, everybody.
And joining us via phone, our newest admin at 21st Century Prepper, Terry.
Hey, guys.
We've all seen the posts and the comments about people wanting to, if something happens, major league happens, shit hits the fan or whatnot, they're going to go to grab their bug-out bag or whatever bag they have, and they're going to head to the woods and live off the land. My biggest concern about that is this isn't the land our ancestors knew 200 years ago or 250 years ago. It's completely different. The landscape has been changed pretty much permanently in some locations. With all the concrete and asphalt and rebar and dams and whatnot, we've been inundated with non-native species of plant life and animals, where the native stuff that the Native Americans that everybody wants to emulate no longer exists in some areas of the country. It's all been taken over by something from another country or another part of the world. So it's not what our forefathers used in their daily life, possibly. So, Terry, you're in what I consider the central east of the country. Some people consider it the Midwest, but what's the situation around your area? Could someone conceivably...
I suppose it's possible some small portion of people that have a skill set might. I followed my grandfather around, who came to his mom and dad came to that area of the country in a covered wagon, and he hunted and trapped and fished to buy farmland. He certainly could, but he didn't think anybody else could, which is why he kept farming and when things changed. So I doubt seriously that people have the skill set, and I doubt seriously with the increase in population that they could. There's plenty of water here, and there's plenty of great growing seasons and stuff, but if you're wandering around trying to find native foods, plants, other than a supplement to what you already have, I doubt it.
Yeah. Tony, what about you?
Well, I don't know if my region's really different about how I feel, because I think a lot of these skills, they're good skills to have, but to plan on having for the rest of your life or years at a time, like you said, we're not what we used to be. You could go out there with backpacking and trapping and fishing equipment. What are you going to do when that stuff breaks? I mean, we don't have the society we do now where people know how to use that equipment, know how to fix it, how to make it on the fly. There's just way too much. Like I said, short term, I think they're good skills to have, but I just think that we live in a world that has forever been changed, as how you said earlier, and they're just not very good to rely on to use the rest of your life.
Well, it'd be maybe a short life.
Exactly. Well, I guess that would be the rest of your life then. So.
Yeah, but not a nice, long, fulfilling life. People talk about hunting and fishing and trapping and wild edibles, and my issue is, what about all the rest of the people? You're sitting there in your house, wherever, thinking about it, going, I could do this. I've gone camping for 2 weeks at a time and, that kind of stuff. But what about the other, let's say you live in a town of 5,000 people. 500 of them would think the same thing if something was to happen. So then all of a sudden there's 500 people standing in the woods going, where are the wild raspberries? Or where are the morel mushrooms? And you got 600 people standing there with fishing lines. There ain't going to be any fish, in 3 days. The fish will be gone because people will be taking anything and everything they catch.
Well, you could easily compare it to just somebody coming over that's from the city and going hunting for the first 3 or 4 years of their life. How many times do they go into the woods for a week at a time and get skunked?
Oh, yeah.
It's different when you've got Pop-Tarts and, tasty cakes back at your trailer or your hotel room or whatever you're doing. But how many people could actually say that they've gone hunting 3 days in a row and never seen an animal? It's very few select people can say that.
Exactly. Actually, my father and I, my uncle, we went up kind of in your neck of the woods, Pete, to the Boundary Waters canoe area on a fishing trip. 3 or 4 grown men that had been fishing their entire lives. We went up there for a week. We caught 1 fish all week. Had we not brought food in with us, we'd be pretty hungry people.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've got family here on 200 plus acres where they went out and saw nothing this deer hunting season. They didn't see a deer. Then other family members got quite a few. So it varies greatly. I just looked up the numbers, and these are estimates because obviously we can't track every deer that's in the country. According to 2009 numbers, there's an estimated 30 to 35 million deer in this country. So let's double that to 60 million. Let's say there's 60 million deer. Moose, whatever, it's like 1 million or something like that. Let's double that to 2. So now we're at 62 million. And then elk was, I forgot what elk was. 4 million or something like that. Let's just say 10 million elk. So 72 million large deer, elk, and moose. What's the population of the United States right now? It's 330 million, give or take. So that's one animal for every, what is that? 5 people? One animal for every 5 people. That's the big stuff. Rabbits, they can't estimate how many rabbits there are. There's hundreds of millions of rabbits. But how long would that stuff last if all these amateurs went out into the woods trying to find deer and rabbit and squirrels? And the nutritional value of a squirrel is so little. You have to eat 8 squirrels a day to get a 2,000 calorie diet. That's crazy. Rabbit, I think, is 4. If you just were exclusively eating one, rabbit for one day, you'd have to eat 4 of them to meet your 2,000 calorie diet. You can maybe do one day, and how are you gonna? What about tomorrow? What about next week? What about a month from now? It's crazy to me for people to think that they're going to go out and live exclusively off the land. We were hunter-gatherers at one time. We were hunter-gatherers 6,000 years ago. There was barely any people in the world. It was a different place.
They worked together better, too. Wouldn't be one person afraid to share their deer, and one person would go out hunt while other people did other stuff. Yeah,
that's how civilization came to be. It's like people gathered together and created a village, and Native Americans cultivated. Some of them didn't. The Plains Indians weren't known for their cultivation, but they did. I think the Eastern Indians did more than classically the Midwest group did, because they were rather nomadic here in the Midwest. Out west, they cultivated. They found seafood, like crustacean remains in Indian villages here in the Midwest. So they actually traded with tribes that were down along the Gulf of Mexico. They traded like lobster and clams or whatever they found. So living off the land, even for the Native American, was not what people fantasize about.
Okay, so it's fantasies. If you're going to try to eat deer or something like that, you don't have near enough. So I got a few degrees, and one of them taught us that if you want to survive, you gotta eat closer to the bottom of the food chain than the top, because there's more available content. Mm-hmm. That means the Indians, they ate what we would consider weeds. Are they edible? Yeah, tastes like crap, but you could probably get some calories out of them. Cattails, I've tried it. Blackbirds, robins, pigeons. There's a whole lot out there, but as you said, it's great for protein, but you don't have any starches involved. Starches and fats are where your calories are at. Mm-hmm. So it really doesn't behoove people to think they can do that. I don't think personally after the first few weeks or something like that, I think there'll be a whole lot less competition. But the other aspect of that is that the animals that you're going out there to look at, they get a lot smarter when they've got pressure on them, so they're not nearly as easy to find. You can see that by the end of deer season around here. Before deer season, they walk right in front of you in the yard. I live on a farm, and And if I'm going to eat, I'm going to eat because I'm going to grow things, not because I may supplement with wild food. I'm going to focus on protecting what I've got, so whoever's out hunting finds my place doesn't decide to eat all my corn or whatever. So anyway, you got to eat close to the bottom of the food chain, and that means not the animals that are sitting on the top, like deer, that concentrate calories, but things like corn and roots and cattails and things that are at the bottom.
Yeah. And guess what? I've got like 2 feet of snow on top of all of that right now.
Huh.
So I'm not going to be doing it in the winter around here. I need, and everybody around me needs to grow it when we can grow it and store it when we can store it. And then hopefully you've stored enough to live off until you can grow some more. I don't know.
The growing season in your area is a lot shorter than it is mine. I can get 2 crops a year easily, and I raise bees too, which is very high calorie content. I get about 20, 25 gallons of honey a year, so those kinds of things help.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's funny. I mean, as we're sitting here talking about this, we've really only touched up on food. Like, if someone wanted to go out there in the woods, we're still talking about you're going to have some kind of fresh water source. You're going to have the basic medical skills, some kind of security, disposal of human waste. That is something nearly every single American has forgotten how to do. What do you do with your human waste, not to contaminate your food and water supply?
Well, even tanning leather, I mean, that's a lost art for some people.
Yeah, and really, my thought on this podcast was just dealing with the food. Shelter, yeah, of course you need shelter, but I've posted it before. I can't walk out into a field and not spin around and see 20 buildings. And I live in a rural area. Now, there's other parts of the country where, obviously, like Montana and Wyoming, you may not see a building for miles and miles and miles, but have to go out into the woods and live in a tent or live in a whatever you have, debris shelter or something like that. It's kind of, I don't know.
It sounds fun on paper, but in practicality, it's just not. Most likely, it's not going to happen for 99% of the population.
Well, you know, there's another aspect to that too. If you live near a national forest, you might say it's everybody's, but with my farm, I'm going to say that everything that's in the borders of my farm belongs to me, and I'm sure other people are going to do the same thing. Be very possessive of that resource, if you get what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
I think just walking across a field to try and get something to eat when that guy that owns that field and has been farming it, or it's been in his family for 100 years, probably has a different idea of whether or not you should be there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's going to be issues. If your idea is, and if you know someone's idea is to go out and they're going to live off the land if something happens, try to point out the things we've covered. I don't want to be like, listen to me because I know all. I don't know all. I'm no expert in anything. To sit back and think about it, but the people's argument is that we've covered already that this is what our ancestors did and we're hunter-gatherers. It's a different world, completely. And there's 330 million people in this country now. As even back 70 years ago, there was only 125 million. People talk about the Great Depression, and the population was less than half of what it is now 70 years ago. So it was a completely different world. If you want to go into the woods, pre-plan your wood trip. Go and build a shelter. Go and have a garden space, whatever. But please don't think you're going to exclusively live off the land, because a lot of people, you're going to fail. I wholeheartedly believe that 99.9% of the people that think that would fail miserably within even a week.
Well, I have a question for you. Maybe you can round it out for me. So we're talking about everything falls apart and you have no access to anything. What about those partial situations? Around here, tornadoes are a big deal. I live not too far from the New Madrid Fault, an earthquake possibility. Out west, you've got the fires like you had this year, and like you said, up north, you've got extended periods of snow. What about those events that are regional, let's say, and they're big deals, but they're not a total breakdown?
With those skills and the basic knowledge, if something were to happen, like I live on the Canadian border, and we get, like Pete does, times where snow is crazy and we can't get supply trucks in. Last winter, we had a month where the grocery store didn't get any trucks in. And these basic skills, had it gotten any worse, would help someone to get through that temporary situation. as opposed to thinking I'm going to go out in the woods for the rest of my life. But again, being on the river, if I know how to fish and I know how to survive basic, I can go catch me fish. But again, after a while, the fish are going to start changing their behavior if everybody in town does that. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
There may not even be any fish left.
Exactly. That's the thing too. That's why long-term solutions are never a good answer. But it's always nice to have these bushcraft skills as a fallback.
Oh yeah, supplement your whatever you've got.
But also in long term, or my basic answer for you, Terry, is the same thing I tell everybody else, is what happens in those. That's why we're preppers. We prepare not only for the so-called zombies or whatever the end of the world is. I prep for up here bad winters. I have enough food where my wife and I can get for 90 days without it. It is very low calorie food. And then I have SOS emergency high calorie food bars. They taste horrible, but they'll get me my calories and the food will get me by in a short term emergency.
I guess that's where I was going with that, because we have the same issues here. I mean, I don't have a bunch of snow, but if you have your roof blown off of your house or something, or a flood, a lot of water down in Texas and here sometimes too, you have a requirement to take care of yourself and prepare for whatever it is that is reasonable. And then that skill set, fixing something that's broken as opposed to going to the Walmart and buying something new, those kinds of things. That's kind of where I was leading with that.
We've just discussed a bunch of stuff on last week in a podcast about seed starting. So we touched on that last week. So I think we'll wrap this one up. I didn't get as ranty as I thought I would. Just think clearly, a little common sense about your plans, especially if they involve going out into the woods and living off the land. Take a second or third or even fourth look at it and go, maybe that wouldn't be a good idea without some planning. Make sure you check us out on 21st Century Prepper on Facebook and also at 21stcenturyprepper.net on the internet. Thank you very much.